The phone rang sharply, cutting through the evening silence. "Amy," my husband James said, his voice unnervingly cheerful. "Please come to Isa Restaurant immediately. It's across from the station. The whole family is here waiting for you." "Isa? The French place? What do you mean the whole family is there?" I asked, confused. "I reserved the place," James said smugly. "I even invited the relatives who usually can't make it. The cost will be about $20,000 and I'll be using your credit card. Hurry up." Before I could respond, he hung up. Staring at the phone, I felt a mix of disbelief and anger. $20,000? My credit card? James's recklessness was beyond comprehension. I grabbed my coat and headed out, my mind spinning with thoughts. I had prepared for this moment, but it didn't make the situation any less infuriating. When I arrived at the restaurant 20 minutes later, James greeted me with a grin that didn't fit the elegant surroundings. "The relatives are in the other room," he said confidently. "Amy, a wife's money belongs to her husband. Supporting me is your duty. You don't have any complaints, right?" I bit my tongue, knowing my response would be more impactful if I waited. According to James, he'd arranged for 25 relatives to enjoy the most expensive meal on the menu. ISA was known for fine dining, but he'd intentionally chosen the $800 per person option. His arrogance was astounding. "James," I said, keeping my voice calm, "how do you plan to pay without money?" "Are you planning to dine and dash?" He scoffed. "Don't be ridiculous. I'm paying with your credit card." That was my cue. I reached into my bag and pulled out a document. "This," I said, placing it in front of him, "is the cancellation certificate for that credit card. I canceled it a month ago. The card you took from my purse is useless." James's face twisted in disbelief. "That's impossible. If it was canceled, why would you keep it in your purse?" "I knew you'd try to steal it," I replied. "I left it there on purpose." His composure cracked. "Amy, how dare you speak to me like this?" The volume of his voice caught the attention of nearby diners. Whispers began circulating. James, realizing he was drawing too much attention, forced a smile and leaned closer. "Stop this nonsense," he hissed. "You're embarrassing me." Moments later, his parents approached, their expressions a mix of confusion and concern. "James, what's going on?" his father asked. "The relatives are waiting. Why are you raising your voice?" James tried to deflect. "It's nothing serious. Let's go back to the party." But I wasn't letting this slide. "Your son planned to pay for this dinner with my canceled credit card," I said, addressing his parents. "He booked this restaurant without my knowledge and intended to spend $20,000 without asking me." His parents' eyes widened. "Is this true?" his mother asked. James laughed nervously. "Amy is mistaken. I'll cover the bill myself." He walked to the cashier, still pretending everything was fine. When he returned, he wore a strained smile. I could tell the card had been declined. He had no way to pay, and panic was setting in. "Tell the truth, James," I said, "before this gets worse." He hesitated, then turned to his parents. I was going to use Amy's card, but I didn't know it was canceled. I'm sorry." His father's face darkened. "You plan to make your wife pay $20,000 without her consent?" James tried to explain, but his excuses only made things worse. "I was just trying to treat everyone. It's not a big deal." His mother's voice rose. "Not a big deal? James, this is unacceptable." I decided to take it a step further. "This isn't the first time he's used my card without permission," I said, pulling out a statement from my bag. "These are his purchases, luxury items for women. Cosmetics, jewelry, none of them for me." James's face turned pale. He reached for the document, but I held it out of his grasp. "Explain these," I demanded. "They were gifts for female colleagues," he stammered, "for their birthdays." His parents were horrified. "You used Amy's card for that?" his father demanded. James tried to recover. "It was necessary for work." Necessary? I interrupted. Those gifts were for your mistress, weren't they? Gasps erupted around us. I pulled out another piece of evidence, a recording. Pressing play, I let the audio fill the room. James's voice, clear and unmistakable, insulted me while a woman urged him to leave me. Who is this woman? I asked, locking eyes with him. How long has this been going on? He stumbled over his words. It's not what it sounds like. She's just a friend. A friend? I scoffed. Then explain the luxury items and this conversation. James's parents were livid. His father's voice boomed. You've betrayed your wife and disgraced our family. Consider this your last day at the company. Fired. James looked at his father in disbelief. You can't do this. You brought this on yourself, his father replied coldly. James turned to me, desperation in his eyes. Amy, please. Let's talk about this. Don't ruin everything. I shook my head. Ruin? You did that yourself. The divorce papers are already filed. His jaw dropped. You filed for divorce? Without telling me? You waved those papers in my face as a threat, I said. I simply signed them. His mother slapped him across the face. You've lost everything because of your arrogance. James tried to argue, but his words were drowned out by the murmurs of disapproval from the relatives. One by one they left, shaking their heads in disgust. As James sank to his knees, I walked away, feeling a sense of liberation. But I knew this wasn't the end. Over the next few days, his calls came nonstop. Finally, I answered. Amy, please, he begged. I'm in trouble. Debt collectors are after me. I know, I replied calmly. You've racked up debts to fund your lies. He was silent for a moment. I'll change. I promise. Can we start over? No, James, I said firmly. Some actions can't be undone. You've betrayed everyone who trusted you. Now you have to face the consequences. He broke down, pleading for another chance, but I had made up my mind. As I ended the call, I felt a weight lift. This chapter of my life was over, and I was finally free to move forward, stronger and wiser than before. But closure wouldn't come so easily. A week after our conversation, I received a letter, a handwritten apology from James. He admitted to his mistakes, but blamed his behavior on pressure from work and expectations placed on him as the heir to his father's company. It was filled with excuses, but there was a part of me that wondered how much of it was true. Was James always this selfish, or had years of living under his father's shadow warped his character? A few days later, I received another call. This time, it was from one of James's co-workers, a woman named Claire. Amy, she began hesitantly, I think you need to know something. James has been borrowing money from employees. He promised to repay them, but... Her voice trailed off. I clenched my fist. James hadn't just betrayed me. He'd dragged others into his chaos. Thank you for telling me, I said. I'll handle it. The next morning, I went to James's father. He welcomed me into his office, his demeanor grim. I've been meaning to talk to you, he said. James's actions have caused irreparable damage to the company's reputation. I nodded. He's been borrowing money from employees and using company funds for personal expenses. Did you know that? His face darkened. No, I didn't, but it doesn't surprise me. Together, we decided on a course of action. James would be required to repay every penny he owed, not just to me, but to the employees he'd exploited. His father also planned to release a statement distancing the company from James's actions. When James learned of this, he was furious. How could you betray me like this? He shouted when I confronted him. Betray you? I shot back. You betrayed yourself. You betrayed everyone who cared about you. For the first time, I saw genuine regret in his eyes. But it was too little, too late. The damage was done, and there was no undoing it. Months passed, and life moved on. I focused on rebuilding my own life, finding strength in the lessons I'd learned. James's name occasionally came up in conversations with mutual acquaintances, but the mentions grew less frequent over time. He had become a cautionary tale, a reminder of the consequences of unchecked arrogance and selfishness. One day, I received a final letter from James. It was brief, apologetic, and filled with a sense of resignation. "I've lost everything," he wrote. "I'm trying to start over, but it's hard. I don't blame you for any of this. I just hope one day you can forgive me." I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer, unsure if I'd ever respond. Forgiveness might come with time, but trust, that was something James would never earn back. As I walked away from the drawer, I felt a sense of peace. The storm had passed, and I was finally free to embrace the calm that followed.